Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Future Salespeople's weekly sales round robin. I'm Andrew Wojslawik, and this is Mr. Alex Guest. Alex, how are you?
Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm doing well. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm really jazzed because last week we shared with our audience that we're doing something new this week, and that we're actually going to share one of our sales trainings on demands with the audience. And this week we are here to talk about how to outbound prospect. Are you ready?
It's going to be a good one.
All right, let's get right to it.
So anytime that we're looking to do outbound prospecting for ourselves, for our clients, one of the things that we like to go through is the sales development cascade. Ultimately, the most important things we're going to be addressing today are going to be the ICP and their paired value propositions. ICP standing for ideal customer profile, if you're not familiar, and then the buyer persona and the paired use cases. The reason that that's so critical here is that you're going to include those buyer personas, those ICPs in what you're searching for. And then later down the line, when you're actually reaching out, cold outbound, cold outreach, sales development, you're going to be using those value propositions and those use cases. Not only is that important for the initial search and the messaging, but as you can see, it's also going to have an input into the cadence, the different channels you're reaching out to, the calls to actions that you use once you've built up that value. So this is really the core of where we need to start. First, we need to decide upon those ICPs and those buyer personas because it's going to drive the way that we search for those people online.
Yeah, and speaking of that, so when it comes to your ICPs and your buyer personas, this is an example of what Future Salespeople has put together for some of our customers. If you don't have some of these for your sales enablement team or for your sales enablement efforts for your sellers, highly recommend you either work with us or work with somebody else or internally to go ahead and accomplish this. But when you're out there and you're conducting your outbound prospecting efforts, you're typically going to focus on one initial ideal customer profile at a time. Make it simple for yourself. You're ultimately going to look for one particular industry, one segment, one region, and those could be things, and Alex will show you in a demonstration here in a few minutes, that could be company size, could be a few other things. Now, in addition to this, when you're searching for those people, you want to make sure that you're finding buyer personas that are actually going to connect with your value proposition. And so when you're doing this, you also want to make it simple for yourself as well and keep a very narrow focus. Search for one sort of function, one level of seniority, and really keep in mind about the success metrics that your product can go ahead and impact or the value that your product can bring. And while you're doing this, again, keep it honed into one particular use case or particular area of interest that will resonate with this individual that you're prospecting for.
Yep, you've got it. So our basic steps when it comes to outbound prospecting, and again, outbound prospecting just being the production of the list of the people that you are going to reach out to, not the cadence design, not drafting the messaging, not creating any of the content as it relates to it, just purely creating that. First, you need to create your prospecting sheet. We'll have an example here, and anybody that wants it, feel free to email us. We're happy to share a copy with you. But that's really the first step. If you create a spreadsheet, whether it's in Google Sheets or Excel, maybe you're a max number fan, that's going to be your recipe for success. Number two is you want to block off time. Blocking off time is big here. You want to make sure that people understand what it is that you're doing, even if it's just yourself, because it's easy to put off outbound prospecting until the end of the day. Then you're tired, you're not very efficient, or you say, I'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow becomes next week, and next week becomes next month, and you never get this done. Once you've blocked off that time, you want to then focus on specializing your efforts. So first, you want to make sure that you have everything lined up. You have your sheet ready to go, you're blocked off time. Then you want to think about how you're approaching this. The way that we like to do it is first, search through all of your ICPs, then search for your buyer personas. Once you've done that, then go on and search for your contact information. Finally, where you find that contact information, add those ICPs, those buyer personas, those products into your sheet. So if you do it in that fashion where you're doing one thing at a time, you get to benefit from the specialization of labor. You're going to go faster. You're going to get this done quicker. And if it's not something that you like to do, you can have as little time blocked off as absolutely possible. So now we're going to move into the demonstrations. First, I'm going to take on searching for ICPs and buyer personas. We do that through LinkedIn Sales Navigator. And then Andrew is going to do a demonstration on the way that we track down contact information, either using the service hunter.io that has some great free tools for everybody, or through our email permutation tool that we use internally to help guess emails if Hunter IDO doesn't have exactly what we're looking for. So I will go ahead and get started on these demos now. All right, so like I mentioned, we like to do our outbound prospecting through Sales Navigator. It's probably the best tool out there. I believe it currently costs $80 per month if you pay for it on a month-by-month basis. And that should easily pay for itself as you're doing your own outbound prospecting. This is actually pretty simple in the way that LinkedIn has updated their system. So you can see here in this search bar, you can search for things directly, but to the right of that, you can click this link that says all filters, and you're going to have their master filter list that pops up. As you begin to add additional filters in here, you'll see that this results number is going to trim down. So when you jump in here, looks like based off of kind of the basic results, we're looking at a total pool of 740,000 or more potential LinkedIn contacts. What I like to do first is start to take a look at that ICP. And like Andrew mentioned, ICPs are going to consist of a region, of a singular industry, and then also a market segment. And we like to do market segment by size of employees because it's the easiest filter to place here within Sales Navigator. So if we add a location here in geography, we always go with the United States. So as you can see, we go from the 740,000 and it's actually increased. So that seems to be a bug in their system. We'll have to let them know about that. Then we're going to start off with the industry. We often work with a lot of software companies, so we'll add that into the mix. And then if we scroll way down here past the role filters, which we will go back up to, you'll see this company headcount. That's how we're going to target market segment. And for this demonstration, we'll go ahead and do the 11 to 50 employee headcount. So that's pretty simple. You just need to get those 3 core or initial criteria for ICP in there, and you'll see how that's whittled down the initial potential audience down to 220,000. Now, if we scroll back up, the role and tenure filters, this is where we're going to input our buyer persona criteria. So seniority level, let's say we go with director. We're going for a little bit higher up in the decision-making tree. Function, we have spent a lot of our career selling into marketing, one of my personal favorite functions, and I've been learning more and more about that discipline every day. And then when it comes to success criteria, the best option that you have on LinkedIn is going to be title. People aren't saying that my success criteria is cost per acquisition, cost per lead, lead conversion, lead qualification. So instead, you want to put in those title criteria. And you might think that anybody in marketing is driven by those types of KPIs, but in reality, they're not, right? So if you were reaching out to somebody and your product helps them drop their cost per lead or improve their conversion, that's going to resonate more with, say, email marketers and lead generators and demand gen people on the marketing team, as opposed to maybe somebody that does front-end web design. Still related, but you want to make sure that you are really tapping into those success criteria. And again, later in another one of our training videos, we talk about how those success criteria, the value propositions, the use cases all work together in the messaging and in the value building. So with the title, there's actually a cool trick here. You can take those, say, 3 different titles that I mentioned: email, lead generation, and the demand gen through these Boolean commands. So instead of searching for email, then searching for lead generation, then searching for demand generation, you can actually use those or statements. So it's actually going to look for people who have email, lead, or demand in their title. So effectively, it would be, we are looking for directors of email marketing, of lead generation, or demand generation using this search. Now, I'm not putting generation in there because it's kind of unnecessary, but you can if you think it's going to help you get a more targeted audience. The one thing about this tip is, if you are going to use multiple search criteria, keywords, anywhere that you're using or and statements, you have to keep the keywords undercased. Otherwise, it won't work. So email has to be undercased or has to be capitalized. Lead has to be undercased or has to be capitalized. So that's really all it takes to do the search. So up here on the top, again, we have our region, we have our industry, which is computer software. On the bottom, we have our market segment with the employee headcount. Then we have our specific buyer persona, directors of marketing that are either in charge of email marketing, lead gen, or demand gen. And you see that we went from millions of users down to 125. So we just search for this, it's going to pop up that list of people that we probably want to go through. And what we like to do is tab this out. So I like to tab these out about 5 at a time. So I'll take the first 5 links and I will hold command on my Mac keyboard, and it's control on a Windows keyboard, and open up those 5 tabs. Then as I'm searching through to see, okay, does this director of demand gen meet my criteria? I can search through it. I will keep that tab open if it passes muster for me. If it doesn't, let's say maybe this next one, actually simulation-based training, career development, that's not really what I'm looking for. I can just exit this out. So then when I go on to searching for the contact information for these people, I've at least gone through one level of filter. So that's actually a great segue into Andrew's end of the demonstration. Now that we have a list of people, how are you going to see if you can get their contact information, if it's accurate? And then once it's accurate, that's when we know we're going to put it into our prospecting list to save ourselves the most time and energy once we actually start our sales development or our outreach process. Andrew, over to you.
Great, Alex. So I want to go ahead and help you find those prospects' contact information. We're going to go through our own personal playbook. We'll share our personal steps, our own resources, and you can get access to all those by sharing your email in the comments below or emailing us. When we find an interesting prospect, somebody who meets our criteria for the buyer persona that we're prospecting, we're going to use hunter.io first. They have a free version as well as a paid version. And when I'm in there, I personally like to use the Finder feature. So I like to go through and type in a person's name. So I'm going to use Andrew Voislavic. We're using our contact information here. And F salespeople. That's boop. Go ahead and conduct a search.
They've got us.
Boom, they've got us. And you can see that here is Andrew's email at fsalespeople.com, and it's actually been verified. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And then once I find that person's contact information, I'm going to drop them into our prospecting sheet. And again, you can have access to this. And the prospecting sheet's a pretty basic one. As Alex mentioned in his other in the earlier video, you can go ahead and get your CRM information and export that and then use that as your prospecting sheet. But for us, a basic one is going to have the ICP, the buyer persona, the company name itself, the website, phone number for that organization, their LinkedIn as a company, and then the contact information, first, last, email, job title, phone number, contact LinkedIn, and location, and if necessary, also notes. So I've gone ahead and I found that verified email on hunter.io. However, you're not going to have a 100% success rate. And some of the emails are going to be inferred by hunter.io with their own email permutation tool. Now, what we use here at Future Salespeople is our own email permutation tool. And so we go ahead and we can put in somebody's first, last name, their website, their LinkedIn, their title, and go ahead and put in their role and come up with the most likely syntax to go ahead and guess what their email could be. And we would take it from there and use a service like Bright Verify to go ahead and validate what emails they may have, and then ultimately put it into our prospecting sheet. Should all of this fail for you, you can always put somebody's first, last name, and their company domain into Google and see if you get lucky or not. That's it. Alex, what feedback do you have, my friend?
No, I think this sounds great. And ultimately, doing a lot of work in a spreadsheet is going to help you process this much faster. And coming up next, we are going to go through some of the tips and tricks to help you get the most yields the fastest using this platform before we say goodbye and talk about what the next episode is going to be.
Boom, I love it. So hopefully those demonstrations helped you better understand the process, or what we find to be the best process to go through, find your ICPs, find your buyer personas, and ultimately gather contact information. As Alex mentioned before the demos, we have that prospecting sheet as well as an email permutation tool. Go ahead and either email us or drop your emails below, and we'll go ahead and make sure you get a copy or just drop a comment. So outside of having that sheet, outside of having those tools, we want to share some additional best practices. And so Alex had talked about earlier about blocking off your calendar. And this is one of my favorite, most impactful best practices. It's one thing to block off your calendar, but some general best practices, as Alex mentioned, is some amount of time. And so when I think about the amount of times I recommend to new sellers to block off for prospecting, I mentioned avoid high contact windows with their prospects on the phone. So don't set aside, early the morning hours or later in the afternoon for going ahead and adding your prospecting sheet. You want to go ahead and actually make dials during that time. The second tip that we have for you all is a little extra, right? And so, Alex and I tend to look at this through two different lenses. Alex likes to look at it, if your target is 30, you're ultimately going to only find maybe 20 of those individuals' contact information, which is a great point and definitely true from my experience as well. I also like to think about this at the way end of the gate too, of inevitably 60% of the deals that you've said forecasted to win will not actually close and they'll ghost on you. So it's always nice to have a little more at the beginning anyway. And then the last one is just sticking to it, right? Sticking to it could be a variety of things. For us, it's really sticking to the ICP, the buyer persona, and the task at hand. So only have the windows open for your prospecting sheet. It's not fun, but it's a way for you to have success and really hit your numbers within business development. Mr. Guest.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with the sticking to it. When it comes to prospecting, you are going to find somebody that looks like they might be your buyer, an industry that looks interesting, but you want to stick to your ICP, your buyer persona for this round of prospecting. If you find something that's interesting, set that up for the next campaign, but don't get distracted by shiny objects. This is your opportunity to generate the core of your business. When it comes to other tips, best practices, efficiency is huge for me. Anytime that you are doing this, I like to minimize distractions. So this is a headphones on, no media around me. If I'm listening to music, I'm listening to something that doesn't have any vocals or any words to it. It's just kind of background noise, maybe some EDM, depending on the energy of the day. It helps me stay focused on the task at hand. Also, when you're going through this, I like to tab things out as much as possible. I did talk about that a little bit in my demonstration, but if you click and tab things out, maybe you work at things 5 at a time, that's going to help you process things. You get into a good rhythm of the way that you're looking at things, the way that you're trying to track down contact information, and only filling out your prospecting sheet where you find that information first to help you save some valuable seconds. Finally, around formatting, if you are going to take this outbound prospecting sheet and you're going to upload it into HubSpot CRM, into their marketing automation tool, into a sales automation tool like Sales Loft or Outreach, have your prospecting sheet formatted like you would import that into their program. If they have particular columns and the order that those need to be in, have your prospecting sheets set up like that from the get-go, so you then don't have to spend additional time when you import that.
Yes, best yet, just download their template and make that your prospecting sheet, right? Like,
also an option.
Save yourself so many headaches. That's honestly the best tip after importing thousands and thousands of rows of data. But friends, we really hope you enjoyed this. And next week, going along with this theme of sales development, of outbound business development, of prospecting, we want to help you start providing value and prioritizing value in your sales development efforts. If you can't provide value, you shouldn't send the message. So stay tuned next week, and we look forward to sharing that with you. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.